Janelle Brown spent 29 years married to Kody Brown. There is no court on earth where she has to file a single piece of paperwork to leave him. No lawyer, no judgment, no filing fee, no waiting period. Legally speaking, she was never his wife to begin with. So the question that should be keeping everyone up at night isn't why she left, it's why leaving still required a phone call, why it still required a process, why Janelle Brown, the most self-sufficient woman on that entire compound, still had to ask someone else how the door worked. If this kind of breakdown is what you're here for, do me a favor right now. Hit like, hit subscribe, and tap that bell, because we go deep on this channel, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's talk about the quietest exit in reality television history. September 28, 2025. SisterWives Season 20 premieres, and in the middle of what TLC is probably billing as another dramatic Brown family chapter, Janelle Brown sits down in front of a confessional camera and says, with the energy of someone ordering a sandwich, that she is pursuing a spiritual divorce, modeled on Meri's, and that Meri is, quote, helping me get in touch with everybody. Read that sentence again, slowly. Meri Brown, the woman Kody publicly humiliated for years, the woman who the other wives kept at arm's length, the woman who finally walked away in 2023 and spent a year rebuilding herself from scratch? Meri Brown is now the logistics coordinator for spiritual divorces? She has become the exit consultant, the divorce whisperer, and Janelle called her first. That is not just a plot twist, that is a complete inversion of everything Sister Wives told us it was about. Let's rewind, because to understand why this moment hits the way it does, you have to go back to the original sales pitch of this show. When Sister Wives premiered in 2010, the central argument, the one Kody made in interview after interview, the one that was supposed to justify the whole arrangement to a skeptical American audience, was that plural marriage meant more commitment, more depth, more covenant. Kody used that word constantly, covenant, as if the absence of a legal certificate somehow made the spiritual bond stronger, purer, more serious than what the courts could ever recognize. He would look directly into the camera and explain with complete sincerity that these marriages were more binding because they were chosen, because they were sacred, because no government bureaucracy was involved. For 30 years, that was the framework. Spiritual marriage as the higher form, legal marriage as the lesser, more transactional version. And then Janelle Brown asked Meri who to call to get out of one. Here's what that moment actually exposes. If the spiritual marriage is real, if the covenant is binding in the way Kody always insisted, then Janelle needed a real process to dissolve it. She needed ritual. She needed the same acknowledgement Meri had to seek out. She needed the framework to recognize her exit the same way it once recognized her entrance. Fine, that's internally consistent. But here's the problem for Kody. If the covenant is real, then Janelle's release from it is equally real. She is genuinely gone. The bond he insisted was deeper than any legal document has now been formally, spiritually, ritualistically severed. He can't argue that spiritual marriage means something and then turn around and say spiritual divorce means nothing. But watch what happens if he tries the other direction. What if Kody decides to push back? What if he suggests the spiritual divorce isn't legitimate? What if he goes on camera, and this is very much in his behavioral history, and implies that Janelle can't just walk away from a sacred covenant with a phone call to Meri? The second he makes that argument, he has to explain why the covenant was strong enough to hold her, but not strong enough to protect her. He has to explain why for 3 years, Janelle was essentially living alone in an RV on their property, while he invested his entire emotional life in one wife. He has to explain why a covenant that supposedly meant everything produced a woman who had, by her own admission, emotionally checked out long before 2025. He loses both ways. If the spiritual divorce is real, she's gone, and he has to live with it. If the spiritual divorce isn't real, the spiritual marriage wasn't either, which means 30 years of his own framing just collapsed on top of him. This is not a man who handles contradictions gracefully. We have 17 seasons of evidence for that. Now, I want to talk about Janelle specifically, because I think she deserves more credit than this show ever gave her. And I think the way she handled this exit is a case study in a particular kind of intelligence that reality television almost never rewards. Janelle Brown was always the practical wife. Not the romantic lead that was Christine, at least in the early seasons, before Christine figured out she deserved the lead role in her own story. Not the wounded one that was Meri, who spent a decade being publicly diminished on a show she helped launch. Not the protected one that was Robyn, whose position in the family was subsidized in ways that the other wives were not. Janelle was the one who worked, the one who kept spreadsheets, the one who, when the family was financially underwater, quietly went back to corporate America to stabilize the household while Kody pursued real estate ventures of varying success. She was the one audiences trusted because she never seemed to be performing. She was just there, steady, clear-eyed, a little dry. And here's the thing about that particular quality. Steadiness in a reality TV context is both a superpower and a vulnerability. It makes you credible. It makes audiences lean on you as the reliable narrator. But it also makes it very hard for producers to notice when something has shifted. Because Janelle Brown doesn't signal distress the way the format expects her to. She doesn't raise her voice in parking lots. She doesn't cry in front of cameras in ways that clip well. She just changes. Slightly. Incrementally, and by the time the audience catches up, she's already 3 decisions ahead of where you thought she was. My read, and I want to flag this clearly as my interpretation, not established fact, is that Janelle's emotional departure from this marriage didn't happen in 2022, when she moved into the RV. It didn't happen in 2023, when the separation became public. I think Janelle left Kody the day she stopped explaining herself to him. And if you go back through the last several seasons, you can actually watch that moment shift. You can see her in confessionals where she's still translating her own feelings for the audience, still working through the logic of why things aren't working, still generous with context. And then there's a point somewhere in the middle seasons where she just stops. Not dramatically, she doesn't slam a door, she just stops offering the translation. She answers questions more briefly, her confessionals get quieter. She starts talking about her kids and her granddaughter and her life in North Carolina with this particular kind of warmth that has nothing to do with Flagstaff, nothing to do with the family compound, nothing to do with Kody. The spiritual divorce in 2025 is, in this reading, the paperwork catching up to a decision her face already made 3 seasons ago. Now, let's talk about what she actually said. Because I've seen these words quoted around, but I don't think people are sitting with them long enough. Janelle said, on camera, in what appears to be her natural conversational register, not a tearful confessional, not a confrontation scene, just Janelle being Janelle, she said, I had sort of thought about a spiritual divorce a long time ago, and didn't even realize it was an option. And so when Meri got one, I'm like, oh, hey Meri, who do I call? Read that in her voice. Hear the cadence. The sort of, the a long time ago, the didn't even realize it was an option, which is doing enormous work in that sentence, by the way. She's telling us she was ready before the mechanism existed. She was standing at the exit before anyone had built the door. And then Meri built the door. And Janelle didn't agonize over it, didn't convene a family meeting, didn't ask Kody for permission or processing time. She called Meri and asked who to call next. The casualness of it is the entire point. This is not a woman in crisis. This is not a woman who needs the audience to witness her pain. This is a woman tying off a loose end. The tone of, oh hey Meri, who do I call? Is the tone of someone finding out there's a faster route to the airport. It's logistical. It's efficient. It's Janelle Brown being exactly who she has always been. Except this time, the practicality is aimed directly at the exit. And that brings me to something I want to spend a minute on, because it matters for how season 20 plays out, and what it means for the show going forward. Kody Brown has a pattern. It is well documented across 17 seasons of footage. When a wife leaves, or challenges him, or forces a confrontation, his emotional register on camera tends toward performance. Not performance in the cynical, calculated sense. I think he genuinely feels what he feels. But the feelings arrive in a format that television can use. There's volume, there's a grievance, there's a very specific kind of wounded dignity that the show has built multiple episode arcs around. When Christine left, there was a confrontation. There was the parking lot. There were confessionals where Kody processed his feelings at length and in detail, which gave producers something to cut around. Janelle's exit gives him nothing to perform against. She's not angry. She's not making accusations. She's not issuing ultimatums or showing up to climactic conversations. She's in North Carolina. She's posting pictures with her grandkids. She went to the season 20 premiere talking about her wellness routine and making jokes about wanting a man with good pecs and a sense of humor. She is, by every available metric, fine. Possibly better than fine. And you cannot grieve someone who isn't fighting you. You cannot play the wounded party when the other person has already moved the scene to a different state and started a different life in it. This is, structurally, Kody's worst possible outcome. Not the angry exit, not the dramatic confrontation, the shrug, the phone call to Meri, the mild joke about future dating preferences, the complete absence of him in her emotional architecture going forward. That's the one he doesn't have a script for. Let's zoom out to the thematic level for a second, because I think this is where the story gets genuinely interesting beyond the reality TV mechanics. SisterWives was sold to audiences as a story about plural marriage, offering women more community, more sisterhood, more support. The argument, explicit in the early seasons and implicit throughout, was that these 4 women had something most married women didn't: each other. The infrastructure of the family was supposed to be the benefit. The network was the point. And here's the irony that season 20 makes undeniable. The support network did work. It absolutely worked. Just not the one Kody built. The network that's functioning right now, the one that helped Janelle navigate an exit that had no legal template and no cultural script, is the network the wives built for themselves. Largely in spite of him. Largely after the marriages had already broken. Christine left first and modeled that it was survivable. Meri invented the spiritual divorce and modeled that the framework could be exited with dignity. Janelle called Meri and followed the map. The sisterhood is operational. The plural marriage, as a structure Kody presided over, is not. The show gave these women the tools and the platform and the audience, and then those women used all 3 to build something that outlasted the arrangement. And now look at where everyone actually is. Janelle's circle right now includes Christine, Meri, her own adult children, and her grandchildren in North Carolina. She's talked on camera about finding community there, about what it feels like to be somewhere she wants to be. Her kids, the ones who grew up watching this family slowly fracture, are in her corner and in her life. The network around Janelle Brown is, by any reasonable measure, full. Kody's is not. Kody's circle, at this point in the story, is Robyn. That's it. The man who spent years talking about the richness of plural family life, the man who said covenant over and over like it was protective armor, is sitting in Flagstaff with 1 marriage and a reality television show that is running out of wives. And this is where I want to land on what the finale of this entire chapter actually looks like, not just for Janelle, but for the show itself. Meri got the first spiritual divorce. Janelle is getting the second. And if you think about the logic of what's left, Robyn is Kody's legal wife, so there is no exit mechanism there that the show can frame as spiritual evolution. There's no third wife waiting to call Meri. There's no 4th storyline of liberation and reinvention. The architecture that made SisterWives work as a television show was 4 women navigating one complicated shared life. That architecture doesn't exist anymore. What exists is Kody and Robyn in Flagstaff and 3 women who have individually, in their own time, on their own terms, chosen different lives. Season 21, if it happens, has to answer a very uncomfortable question. What is this show about now? Because the premise is gone. The plural family is gone. What's left is the aftermath. And aftermath television can work. We've seen it work, but it requires the show to be honest about what it's documenting. It has to stop pretending there's a family to save, and start being honest that what it's actually covering is the end of one, which might be the most compelling season they ever make, if they're willing to make it honestly. So here's where I land on all of this. Janelle Brown walked away from a 30-year arrangement with no lawyers and no courtrooms and no legal paperwork because none of those systems ever recognized her marriage to begin with. And yet, she still needed a process. She still needed ritual. She still needed someone who had gone before her to show her how the door opened. That's not a failure of the spiritual marriage framework. That's actually proof that the framework was real enough to require a real exit. What it exposes is that nobody ever thought to design the exit for the women. Nobody sat down in 1995 or 2005 or 2010 and said, okay, if this doesn't work, here's how she gets out with her dignity intact. Nobody built that. The women had to build it themselves. Meri built it for herself and then handed it to Janelle like a gift. And Janelle, being Janelle, called immediately, got the information she needed, and made the appointment. That's the whole story, really. Not the drama, not the confrontations, not the parking lots and the confessionals and the family meetings that went nowhere. The story of Sister Wives is about 4 women who signed up for something they were told would be more, and who spent 2 decades building the actual more, the community, the trust, the practical knowledge of how to survive on the margins of an arrangement that was never primarily designed around what they needed. And Janelle is the last one standing in that exit line. Not because she was the slowest to figure it out, because she was the steadiest. She waited until she had everything she needed on the other side of the door before she walked through it. North Carolina, her grandkids, a real community, a sense of humor about pecs. She did not leave until she was ready, and when she was ready, all she needed was a phone number. She got it from Meri. Of course she did. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think Sister Wives ends with season 21? Does TLC have enough material left to justify another chapter? Or does Janelle's spiritual divorce mark the actual conclusion of the story the moment when the show runs out of road? Drop a gravestone emoji in the comments if you think it's over after season 21. Drop the recycle emoji if you think TLC finds a way to squeeze another season out of whatever's left in Flagstaff. And subscribe to this channel because I will be right here tracking every single move in this story. If there's a 3rd spiritual divorce, we'll cover it. If Kody does a solo confessional in an empty house, we'll analyze it. If Meri becomes the official exit coordinator for plural families across the American West, we will absolutely do that episode. Hit the bell. You know the drill. I'll see you in the next one.